So, awesome. So guys, thank you for coming. I think tonight we're going to be talking about a very serious topic, which is elections. But one thing I want to sit there and just share with you are two very dear friends of mine. I don't think they'll admit it. But Lynn and Sandra reached out to me, and they have been election judges. I've been your clerk for the last 2 years, and every election that I've coordinated, well, really, they've coordinated, have been election judges, and we have bonded, and I've known Lynn for over 25 years. When she was a science teacher up at Coronado High School, she remembers, she goes, Steve, I remember you were 100 pounds lighter and wearing a dress blue Marine Corps uniform at the time. And I'm like, that really hurt bad. So I really, guys, I want to thank Lynn and Sandra for putting this on. So thanks, guys. They did a lot of hard work, and one of the things when I was sitting there talking with them when they came into my office is they're sitting there talking about misinformation. Has anybody heard that synonymous with elections? It's just the misinformation piece. And I thought that was pretty important. In addition to that, guys, I really, if you allow me, is we're going to go through the PowerPoint pretty quick. Because I think each one of you have questions in regards to what's going on at the state level with elections, what's going on with the county level, but what about the federal level? Because there are things that are brand spanking new to many of us. Because can anybody tell me when's the last time the federal government got involved nationally with elections?
Never.
Voter Right Act, 1993, under President Clinton. Good job, Sandra. So it was like, man. But I know there is a lot of, ideas or questions, as far as what's going on. But again, what I want to do is just welcome each and every one of you guys. In addition to that, is we are recording this, so if any of your friends aren't here, because I understand our Attorney General is downtown, doing a talk down there as well. So it was a little conflicting, but we're going to record this, and Nancy, thank you for doing that, because we're going to go ahead and provide that, put it out on Vote 411, whatever website you guys want to go ahead and put it out there, just go ahead and watch it, because the questions you guys have, how many of our neighbors have the same questions? A lot. So let's go ahead and let's navigate this. Let's talk facts versus disinformation here in El Paso County. And I told Christy that I would rub my eyebrow for her to go ahead and move the slide. So guys, I think everybody sitting here going back, why election accuracy matters is many in our community is if there is a bureaucracy mistake. So let's say your county assessor makes a mistake on your house and he overvalues your house by $50,000, which means guess what happens then? You're paying more in taxes. However, there are processes in place to correct that mistake. However, do you think citizens allow for any mistakes with elections? There's absolutely zero wiggle room when it comes to elections, which is why accuracy absolutely matters when it comes to elections. The other thing is community impact. This November, we have a coordinated election coming up. Anybody think that's going to be a pretty important election here locally? School boards, municipalities asking for us to pay higher taxes. A lot of different things, but a coordinated election really impacts local here in, Colorado Springs and El Paso County. The other thing is combating misinformation. Anybody want to take a guess how much I've done on that since becoming clerk? A lot. I'm under the desk in a fetal position. I'm kidding. But there is a lot of misinformation, and we're going to sit there and talk about that. Because as soon as I became the clerk, I hit it head on. And I'm just very in your face, direct. I will tell you the exact truth and beg for forgiveness later. And I'm also a person, I'm going to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. So those are the folks that have known me for quite some time, absolutely will sit there and share. It's like Steve is going to be brutally honest. And folks, if there was a problem with any aspects of our voting system, I would be absolutely 100% open and transparent with everybody going, there's problems and here's what we need to fix. So we're going to talk about that. Thanks, Christy. So recognizing disinformation. So guys, let's talk about some of the things that Angie and I are hit on each and every day. Claims about deceased voters voting. Anybody hear that one? That's where I campaigned. I was down at Evergreen Cemetery and I had a lot of people vote for me. So that's how I became your clerk. Joke. Rigged machines or discarded ballots often circulate without evidence. We're going to talk about that. Red flags in sources. Be wary of anonymous sources, emotional language, and claims without specific evidence. Guys, AI is playing a major role in our elections today. And I will tell you, that was a huge concern during our 2024 general election, which many in this room know I activated the Office of Emergency Management. I did that, and I was the only clerk in the state that did that, but I did it for several reasons. One of which was, I felt it was a very high anxiety election. There was a lot of anxiety, and no matter who won the election, someone was going to be upset. Two is misinformation. And when I activated the Office of Emergency Management, is they were basically reviewing all of our ballot boxes, ensured no one was prevented from casting a ballot or going into our VSPCs to be intimidated. In addition to that, I was working with Northcom in regards to getting information from the dark web and AI and misinformation. And guys, there was a lot. But thanks to Northcom, the assets we have here in El Paso County, I think that was one of the most successful elections, the November 2024, that we've seen in quite some time. We had over 36,000 in-person voters, which set a record. It was quite a bit. Also, verification methods, cross-checking information. Where do you guys go? I mean, if you're hearing information, where do you guys go to find the truth?
MSNBC.
I go Facebook. So, guys, please call us. And, Angie and I and the team will absolutely be brutally honest with you. Call us. That's what we're here for, is just to share, what is going on and things like that. The other thing is, think before sharing. One of the things, guys, I will tell you is one of the things that scared me is we all know about the BIOS password leak that happened several days before the election. And how I found out was one of my election judges was a VSPC coordinator here at the Citizen Service Center and said, Steve, have you seen this? And showed me a tweet. And I'm like, this is misinformation. Well, as soon as I got upstairs, my communications specialist said, Steve, have you seen this? And I said, that's misinformation. And sadly, it wasn't. But this is where we sit there and we communicate. We sit there and try to figure things out before, letting the rumors get out there, because on social media, guys, unfortunately, that stuff will run rampant. Absolutely. And I think we've all have seen it, where folks are sitting there saying, we need to go back to paper ballots. Guys, what do you get in the mail? Paper ballot. But it's amazing how many people don't sit there and think about that when they're actually voting on a paper ballot, that they want to go back to paper ballots. So reliable sources for voting information. My office, Secretary of State, ballot tracks, election hotlines. And guys, during an election, we actually have bipartisan judges that are in there answering the questions. You can call us up on the hotline. We have Republicans, Democrats, unaffiliated, that are sitting in there working with one another, that are answering the questions. And one thing I want to share, how many here have served as election judge? Oh my gosh, that is amazing. So guys, I will tell you, I was really concerned as your new clerk, especially with how elections, politics are today. I was really concerned about election judges not getting along. That is farthest from the truth. And what I've seen is these individuals are extremely close. They talk about their grandkids, their kids, or going on a trip. Zero politics are even spoken. There's hugs. It's just an amazing thing where you see Republicans and then Democrats and unaffiliated getting along. Imagine that. But again, just having the judges do that. But guys, going to reliable sources for voting information is critical. And the reason why I'm sharing this is over the next year, we're going to be hearing a lot about elections. And this is where I, as your clerk and recorder, is going to be out there talking the truth of what actually is going on. Thanks, Christy. So, the role of the clerk and recorder's office, one is election planning. Guys, we have already been working on the November 2025 election. So, we're sitting here, we've already had the plans. Angie and her team are already looking at VSPCs, ballot boxes, already getting input in regards to what's going to be going on the ballot. So we have already started working. Believe it or not, we didn't even close the November 2024 election, and we already started on the November 2025 election. So it's a continuous process. We also do voter registration, which I know we're going to have a lot of questions about. Results certification, and also ballot processing. And we're going to talk about a lot of things that we have done here in El Paso County that we have completely turned the elections department upside down and changed a lot of things to be nearly 100% transparent here in El Paso County.
Sir, what's a VSPC?
Voter Service Polling Center. So in person, I sounded smart, didn't I? That and the name Schleiker is never synonymous with one another. So it's a voter service polling center where you do in-person voting. Okay? So commitment to transparency. Guys, we always keep in mind Steve Schleiker and Angie Leith, we do not coordinate the election. Guess who does it? The judges. It's our Democrats, our Republicans, our unaffiliated. They're our neighbors, our family members, friends. They are the ones that coordinate the election, and they also are the ones that do pre-election testing. So when we sit there and we do that, we actually go through a process. We are provided a sample of test ballots. We run them through our tabulators. We get the results, and then guess what we do after that to match the results? Hand count. So we sit there, not only are you looking at the tabulator report is on the same ballots, we hand count, then we also allow the judges to vote 25 blank ballots, however they want. We run those ballots through the tabulators, get that report, and then we hand count. Nothing can proceed until everything has checks and balances. And again, this is done with bipartisan teams. It's also open to public viewing. We put a media release out. We're letting everybody know, hey, come on in. Come watch the whole entire process. The media does show up at times, especially prior to a large election. There's no doubt. Christie will send out a media release. They'll be here to do the testing before an election, where they're going ahead and recording it and things like that. As I mentioned, everything in election is bipartisan teams. Every aspect of it. From answering the phones, to working in ballot processing, to signature verification, to tabulation, VSPCs, to ballot box runners, everything is bipartisan teams. We cannot have two Democrats together. We cannot have two, bless you, cannot have two Republicans together. So it has to, and how do you tell? One has a blue lanyard, one has a red lanyard, and the unaffiliated have a purple lanyard. The other thing is we also have a post-election audit. So once we're done, we also do a post-election audit where we sit there and the Secretary of State says, now you need to go grab a number of ballots. We pull all the ballots out and we put them in the Fort Carson room. And she's basically, by her direction, saying, you need to pull these certain ballots from these boxes. So we can go in a box that has 1,000 ballots in it and we pull one out. But usually we're sitting there sampling about 600, depends on the election, it could be higher. And we're sitting there going through the process of bipartisan teams reconfirming that information and also going looking through the signature and everything like that to make sure everything is copacetic. So prior to a running election, we audit During the election, we audit. And after the election, we audit. So during the election, we also do signature verification. So we will sit there and pull samplings of signatures of what's being approved or not approved by judges. And we will pool that, and we are auditing our judges as they are doing that. So if we're sitting here seeing a high propensity of a judge saying, nope, nope, I'm not accepting this signature, I'm not accepting this signature. So we sit there and we actually audit that information, or vice versa. So these are things that the state right now, the clerks are implementing, and we are auditing right now 2% of our total that is coming in, which is quite a bit when you have over. Anybody want to guess how many active registered voters El Paso County has up today? 508,000. Guys, we went over 500,000 about 2 months ago. So for the November election, and what we were at 496.
On election day, we got to right at 501.
Yep.
So we broke it right at election day, and then of course, changes in between. So we're averaging anywhere from 505 to 508 right now.
So the thing is, guys, not only are we the most populous, but we got the most voters in the entire state. So right now, El Paso County is like key, where they sit there and they look at El Paso County in regards to being the leader in the state, because we surpassed Denver a handful of years ago. Denver can no longer grow. Their boundary, either they go up, but there's no more land. And as you guys see, we got a special election coming up. June 17th, the city clerk is running a special election. I was telling Lynn, guys, we play a big part in that. Because where does she get her voter information? Ballot boxes, security cameras. So we are actually working on that election with our city clerk as well. Thanks, Christy. So recent changes to improve election transparency. So guys, one of the things I did is, the first in the state, is I enhanced the ballot box video monitoring. And I will tell you the reason why I did this. One of which was, as soon as I became clerk and recorder, I asked Angie and Christy and my team, hey guys, tell me what I need to hear. And they just threw up all over the table saying, Steve, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this. And I'm like, let's go. So what we ended up doing is we changed out all of our security cameras on our ballot boxes, and we now stream it to every citizen, every voter who wants to sit there and watch. All 41. But guys, guess what? Here in a couple months, we're going to 44 ballot boxes, and I'll explain why. But now we actually have that out there. The reason why that was important to me is we were spending thousands of taxpayer dollars because we were getting core requests, which is a Colorado Open Record Act. Folks were like, I want the footage of every ballot box. Guys, at that time, 38 ballot boxes, that is a terabyte hard drive, if not more. It included Christy Ridland, who is my deputy, the county attorney, and it took weeks to put all that information together. Once we changed out the camera system, we started streaming, guess how many core requests we've received? 0. So to me, it's the transparency, and a lot of voters are like, Steve, this is awesome. The other thing, guys, to be honest with you, the media loves it, because when they're sitting there looking for B-roll, or they're wanting to find out, all right, where's the traffic at? We're going to go ahead and hit Library 21C to get, all the voters there. But the media does love it. So this has actually become a thing in the state of Colorado. There's a handful of counties that are now following our lead. And we used HAVA grant money to get those, the federal money to get those cameras. So voter registration maintenance program, I've been all over town. Angie and I have traveled to San Diego. We've also been on national webinars. What we've done here in El Paso County with our voter registration, our voter lists. As soon as I became clerk and recorder, guys, I signed a contract with Experian. And we all know that's a credit agency. So the reason why I did that is when I was your county assessor, I got back a ton of return mail. And I'm like, why is this stuff not getting to them? As soon as I became your clerk, I walked in there and I started asking the hard questions like, what are all these ballots sitting in these mail bins, which each mail bin has 100 ballots? In one election alone, there was 49,000 undeliverable ballots. Wow. Guys, that's huge. in a matter of 5 elections, working with Experian, and why Experian is so good is everybody has credit. They have the most up-to-date mailing address for everybody. And the reason why I also did it is, what about our 18 to 35-year-olds? Do you think they use USPS, or are they just on their phone paying their bills? They don't mail a letter. They don't know how to address a letter or put a stamp on it. And guys, I'm hiring these folks. And so I'm being honest, is when a young lady's like, Steve, I don't know where the stamp goes, can you show me? And I'm like, oh my God. But you know what, guys, that is just a change where we are today. And I'm going, how reliable is the USPS data when folks don't even sit there and address Christmas cards because we get a text now? They pay their bills all on their phone, everything. So what we ended up doing, guys, in a matter of 5 elections, Angie and her team has taken the undeliverables from 49,000. This last election, with 50,000 more registered voters, we had 9,000 undeliverables. So 450% decrease. And the thing is, though, what that's telling me is everybody who is getting a mail-in ballot, which is everybody, it's going to the correct voter and is basically being delivered. In addition to that, is we now have a program, I track your ballot from the moment it's printed, inserted, transported, and delivered. So we have a system where I can sit there and track the whole entire process. So when you call our office and say, Steve, where's my ballot? My daughter got hers yesterday. I can sit there and say, well, you're going to be getting yours tomorrow, which is a huge thing in El Paso County, because I think the USPS made a big mistake. Anybody that lives north of Platte Avenue, guess where your mail goes to before it gets delivered?
Denver.
Everybody that's south of Platte, guess where it just goes to? Fountain. So you know Fountain Academy right there?
Right.
It goes directly. So you have citizens here that are getting their ballot a week before everybody else, and it creates a lot of confusion. I haven't got my ballot, I haven't got my ballot. Well, it's going to Denver to be rerouted and come back. But guys, we track every single ballot now. So that's the new mail tracking system. In addition to that, is we have video footage when your ballot is printed, when it's processed. So if anybody has any concerns, and we've been challenged, where somebody will sit there and say, I received 3 ballots in my envelope. We call the vendor, pull the video footage, and we can actually go in and basically provide the video footage to that person, and this is where the misinformation comes from. And sit there and go, I see only 1 ballot, which is yours. Guess where the conversation goes? Nowhere. The other thing is also we have improved signature verification training. And I know there's some ladies here. So I have seen Sandra's eyes cross sometimes and things like that. But the thing is, those signature verification, guys, is the most important piece of an election. Anybody want to tell me why? That's how you tie the voter to the ballot. And it's the correct person that is voting that ballot, because we actually have a database of all of our signatures. So when we go through the Department of Motor Vehicles, you know, just a number of income, you know, through the Department of Revenue, we have all those signatures. And we know, guys, as we get older, guess what happens to our signature? It slants right, or gets scribbly, all that kind of stuff. But I tell you what, our judges on the signature verification is if they cannot find 3 points of reference, they deny it. It goes to the second level. And if they cannot find 3 points of reference with that signature, then that voter gets a cure letter. If that voter does not come in to cure their ballot, guess what happens? It goes to the district attorney for investigation of voter fraud.
And every single ballot gets signature verification.
Every-
It's not a sampling.
Nope. Every ballot has a human eye put on those, has human eyes put on it. So every ballot.
What
Yes, ma'am.
percentage gets rejected?
Ange, if you could, what was the percentage of rejection for our 2024 November election?
I'll have to look it up. Let me look it up real quick.
Okay.
There was, just a few weeks ago, a bill put before the legislature to require a bipartisan team at Tier 1. How do you, it failed.
It did.
How do you handle Tier 1?
So we actually have,
What is Tier 1?
so Tier 1 is the initial process. Ange, go ahead. You already got it?
No, I don't have the number yet, but.
Yeah. Hey, Ange is over there. I got this one. I got this one. Go ahead, Ange. Ange, come on up.
Yeah, oh, sorry. I can't look it up if I.
Guys, this is Ange Leith. She's my elections manager, and she's been doing this for nearly 25 years. She's amazing.
What that bill was is because they didn't have ASR, and so they were allowing.
You want to explain it?
I'm sorry, automatic signature review, sorry. Because we have an Agilus, and that is a machine that we run our ballots through, and we can turn on ASR, automatic signature review. That machine has the latest signature on file for each of the voters. So if it can match up, and it's just like you use like when you're doing electronic checks with banking and stuff like that, it's the same software. If it can pick it, then it gets accepted. If it can't find the match, it's not confident, it is then moved on to Tier 2. Tier 2 is 2 judges, opposite parties, looking at it. They're the ones that make the decision whether or not to accept or to reject it for a cure. Tier 2 has every signature on file that's in the voter record. If we're not using ASR, automatic signature review, we do Tier 1 and Tier 2. It just depends on how busy the election is, because when we're running the Agilus does several different functions, not just ASR. So there are times, or we just have a small batch, we won't run it through ASR, we'll run it through Tier 1, Tier 2, because ASR is considered a Tier 1, basically. So our Tier 1 judges, there's only one judge, they look at it with the latest signature on file. That's all they see. If they've got the 3 points of comparison, then they're going to accept it at that point. If they don't have the 3 points, then it moves to the Tier 2 team, which is 2 opposite parties who have every signature on file. And that's what Sandra's done for us. And what we do for that is we will switch them up, where they'll come in and one day they're Tier 1, and then the next day they're at a team and they do Tier 2. So we don't have the same judges looking at one signature, all day long and just accepting. So we mix it up a little bit. Law does say that if you look at it in Tier 1, you can't look at that same signature in Tier 2. So in order for us to do that, it's a lot of calculations and schedule changes. That Tier 1, once everything is through and either accepted or rejected, then that team that was on Tier 1 can now become Tier 2 the next day, or maybe it's 2 days later, depending on when we get through everything. So in our county, what we do is the first one, Tier 1, is we're still party balanced, but you're working in teams of one, or I'm sorry, yourself, one person, and then it moves to Tier 2.
And we switch. We're never with the same Republican or Democrat either.
Right.
Correct. We
Those
switch
teams
teams.
switch
Yeah. But
basically every day.
what Ms.
Yeah.
Candace was talking about, though, is a bill was going through the House, up there at the legislature, requiring that Tier 1, the initial, would have to be a bipartisan team, so 2 judges. And where that really plays a part is our rural counties don't have this Agilus machine. They do everything by hand. They just don't, when we're sitting here doing 508,000 ballots, they're doing 6,000, which is a completely different thing. So what they were doing is saying, hey, for this process, you need to have 2 judges. However, it died. And the reason why it died is it was shared that it could cost a county a little bit more money in an election because you're going to have additional judges. But I actually supported that bill. Because to me, transparency, bipartisanship through every process of an election is absolutely paramount.
And remember, in Tier 1, even with 2 people there, they're only looking at one signature.
Yep.
They don't have access to look at all of the signatures. And it's the Tier 2 judges and the teams that get to see everything. Did you?
But the ratio of Agilus to Tier 1 to Tier 2 is incrementally smaller as it goes down. So Tier 1 is seeing a vastly higher number than Tier 2, but you only have one judge on there.
Mm-hmm.
And not in El Paso County, of course, but we've seen this abused all over the country, where a single judge performing signature verification is really ripe for abuse.
And it could be, and we can't, of course, speak on other counties or other states, but that's why we also have a very strong audit process with our judges.
Yep.
And we audit our judges every day that they work.
Yep.
And if we see any discrepancies at all, or we're auditing to make sure the judges are paying attention and they're following the rules. Because there are some times where one judge can see 3 points, the other judge can't see the 3 points, but then they go to a different signature. So there's always a conversation in tier 2. Tier 1, it's easy. Does it have the 3 points? It goes on. If you don't see it, it goes to tier 2, and that's where the research is done. And then we audit both tier 1 and tier 2, and we also audit ASR. So we have 3 audits going on in that room at all times.
But tier
Nothing
one
better
is-
than bipartisan, though.
Yes,
Yep.
we do have bipartisan.
Tier one is one person,
Tier 1 is one person, correct?
but they don't know if it's a Democrat or Republican.
They have absolutely no idea, they're just
No
looking
idea.
at a signature. No, they're not looking at any voter information, they're looking at the signature that's on the ballot
Yep.
and the last signature. They don't even get any personal information on that voter at all.
Not at all.
No.
Hi. I
Yes.
was wondering, is there a bipartisan team that adjusts the sensitivity of the Agilus machine?
We do not adjust the sensitivity, it's set at the beginning of the election. When we do our first audit, we have to audit at 100% of the first 150 ballots that go through ASR, and we never touch the sensitivity during an election.
Well, who does make the decision of the sensitivity?
We
Is it
do
a
what's
bipartisan
in-
group?
No, it's what's in our user agreement.
Oh, it's like a contract?
It is, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so we already have that set in there.
You would be shocked, like when I'm working in tier 1 or tier 2, those signatures, I mean, you could superimpose them, that we're getting after the Agilus. The Agilus is, it has to be a perfect match to go through the Agilus and get accepted, and I mean perfect. If it's even slightly off, we get it. And some of the signatures that we get, we're like, how did this not get, you know, accepted by the Agilus, because they are so close. And, you know, I'm sitting and there's an opposite person on both sides, so I never get to sit by someone else in my party. It's, you know, Democrat, Republican, Democrat, Republican. And sometimes we laugh, like, how did this not get accepted? So the Agilus, when they say it's
Very
spot on,
strict.
it is
So
spot on.
you, as the election officials, need to make sure that the settings are with the contract, right?
Correct.
Yeah, it's the conditions of use, yes.
Yep. Yep, but as, you know, Sandra alluded to, every signature is being looked at by human eyes. You know, sitting there taking a look at it. But the Agilus machine, as, you know, Angie just alluded to, it does more than just looking at the signatures. It can also determine, you know, if a voter is required to provide ID with that ballot. So if they registered online, but they did not show proof of ID to register, they have to sit there and provide that, you know, when they mail their ballot. If they do not, then they get a cure letter. And again, if they don't come in, you know, to cure that ballot, of course, that ballot is not counted and it goes off to the district attorney for investigation of voter fraud. So, you know, that is a big thing that I really pushed this last election is cures. Is, guys, you will not believe how many people did not know, or even talking to party leadership. It's like, guys, if they don't come in to cure these ballots, it goes to Michael Allen for investigation. In which here, guys, in El Paso County, I'm the only clerk that has a full-time investigator from the district attorney's office on my payroll that is sit there investigating voter fraud. Yes, ma'am.
How many did you actually refer to the DAs?
Ange was pulling that up.
Yeah, that's what I'm pulling down.
Yeah, I don't want to give any kind of false numbers. Yeah. But Christy, if you could go. So recent changes to improve election transparency. One thing, guys, as soon as I became clerk, we gutted the election room and we got new tabulation equipment in there. These machines are completely air-gapped. They cannot connect to an outside network. There's no Wi-Fi cards, there's no network interface cards, there's no wireless adapters, anything like that whatsoever at all. In addition is that any kind of the cords, and folks that have been in the tabulation room, and I see many here that have been in there, all the cords coming out of the CPU are on the floor. They're not in the walls. And you could trace each cord from each machine as it goes over to the server within the tabulation room. The other thing, guys, is we also put every CPU in a locked cage in their own individual where you cannot get access, the judges can't even get access to these machines. The other thing is we also put port locks. And so the question came up, well, Steve, what about thumb drives? What about pigtails? What about this type of stuff? Well, we put port locks in each one of these CPUs where you cannot access any of the ports, to include you can't even access the machine with it being in the steel locker. The other thing is comprehensive election website. Guys, this is something that I was really proud of, is we're the only county in Colorado and the nation that worked with a company called Spatialist. And we developed a GIS election platform where during an election you can actually look at voter registration live, voter turnout live to the precinct level, where you can basically go to precinct 114 and say 17% of voters have already cast their ballots. And you can sit there and take a look at the turnout. But the reason why I did that, not only for transparency, but has anybody heard of misinformation of thousands of Republicans are changing their affiliation to become a Democrat to impede on their primary? Have we heard those kind of rumors? Yes. Guys, that's why you have voter registration. That's why you get live voter updates where you can sit there and go, it's not happening. Where you see people changing their registrations. It's got historic information on there from previous elections. It also has census data. Anybody want to sit there and share with me what the most alarming thing of the November 2024 election? Because I was out there telling everybody we're going to have a 90% turnout. We were at 79%. So here is one of the things, the reason why we were way off, is if you look at West Broadmoor from west side of Fort Carson, going all the way up to Monument, Black Forest, coming all the way down through Falcon, many of those precincts were in the high or mid 80s of voter turnout. Anybody want to take a guess where Southeast Colorado Springs came in? 40s.
Yeah.
45, 50. That's where it came down, where a lot of folks in Southeast Colorado Springs just were not engaged, which was really sad.
What district is that?
So you're looking at Harrison School District. So you're, again, going by, east of I-25, south of Platte Avenue. So it's Eastboro, Southboro, that area, Harrison School District too. Yep. It's Stratford Valley. Yep.
Does Fort Carson, I'm sorry, does Fort
No.
Carson have its own?
Yep. So Fort Carson has two precincts. There are 800 and 801 because we actually have individuals that are registered and they go ahead and vote and things like that. But one of the things I want to talk about is going back to working with Experian guys. What makes El Paso County the most unique county in the entire state?
Military.
5 major military installations. We're the only county in the entire nation that has those many military installations. And when you have such a frequent, people are PCS and all the time. They're here for one election and they're gone the next. Is having that information, making sure addresses are up to date is critical. Angie, you got those numbers?
I do. So we turned over for signature discrepancy for people that didn't hear before the deadline, we turned over 3,684 people. And then the other one we turned over is we had 90 people attempt to vote twice. So we counted the first ballot, rejected the second ballot, turned them over to the DA.
Yep.
That's not too bad.
Yep. So the other thing, guys, is here in the middle of May is we're launching a new auditing program where you will be able to go in and audit any race, any question, any election that you want. You're going to be able to have access to the ballot image and also the cast vote record. So individuals that actually want to get into the details. And so the thing is, though, we all know El Paso County set a record in November for the closest race in Colorado history. 3 votes. Come on. They need to walk and knock doors a little harder. But guys, I will tell you what is one of the things, and I applaud the judges and my staff, because it was a 7-vote difference when the election closed, and we knew we would have to go into a mandatory recount. This was during Thanksgiving week. The staff and judges gave up their Thanksgiving. And the reason why they did that is not only did we have to get it done within the statutory time frame, but in addition, we have 2 candidates that have high anxiety, their campaigns, and their parties going, hey, we want a winner. Who won this?
Which race was that?
What's that? It was House District 16. It was Representative Stephanie Hill and Rebecca Kelty. And so what happened is, you know, we went through the process, and guys, I will tell you, is the day of canvass, Angie and the attorney from the Secretary of State's office walk into my office and said, Steve, we need to close the door. That's not good when an attorney says that to me. And the thing, what it came down to, at the end of the recount, they were statistically tied. By Colorado law, how do you choose a winner if they both have the same amount of votes?
You flip a coin.
Or you put a name in a hat. Can you imagine? Or what they do is what I learned, and Mike, I don't know if you and I talked about it because you spent a lot of time in that room during that process, is they always tell a clerk, have a brand new deck of cards, high card wins. And that's how you choose it. But what we ended up doing is we actually pulled the adjudicated ballots, the real ballots, and made copies for anybody that was a watcher or even the canvas board. And we went through that process, but it was a 3-vote difference, which now is the closest race in Colorado history. So
where's the website?
So this right here, yep, so if you go actually out to the clerk and recorder, go into elections, you will see EPC VIP. It is a really, really good website. I know some in here actually go out there quite a bit and pull statistics, because there's also census data that is on there where you can sit there and look at a district and find out what the education attainment is, median level, you know, ethnicity, things like that. A lot of good information. So Christy.
Steve, I'm still trying to process the people that tried to vote twice.
Yeah.
What happens to them?
So, you know, sadly, guys, I will tell you, a lot of times, it's a mistake. You have individuals that will sit there and they're waiting and waiting and waiting for the mail to come in, and they're extremely anxious. They want to vote, so they go to the VSPC. They vote in person. 2 days later, the ballot shows up in the mail. Guess what they do?
Okay, I feel
They do it, but they will get caught. The other thing is, though, guys, many of it, the high percentage is seniors. But the thing is, there's process. I was going to be like, guys, I'm 35 years old. Look what this job's done to me. I look like hell. So, but you know, the thing is, they get caught. And the district attorney is on it. They reach out to them, and I actually get the investigative on every single one. They reach out to me and things like that. But when you're sitting there talking about 60 individuals voting twice, they do get caught. Yes, Candace?
Steve, backing up a little bit to the last point you're making, it almost sounded like you were saying, if I understand you, that we are able to go to the website and look up a ballot image. It sounds like you're saying we can find our own ballot image and compare it with the cast vote record. Can you please clarify that?
I am glad you said that because
Mesa County just rolled theirs out, and it sure sounded like what I just described. And we all know it's impossible, once the ballot's separated from the envelope, to ever put the two back together again. So there's no verifying your own individual ballot.
Right.
Can you please clarify that?
Absolutely. Candace is absolutely right, because one of the most important things about an election is voter integrity and voter anonymity. And so when you sell it, you know, basically pull a ballot out of the envelope, that's it. And so what they're seeing here is when you look at a ballot image, you have no idea who voted that ballot. But you will sit there and be able to look at the adjudicated ballots right along with the cast vote record. So here in 2 weeks, guys, if you wanted to audit HD 16 like the Canvas Board did, you're gonna be able to do it. You're gonna be able to sit there and go in and just say, I wanna look at all ballots of HD 16. You can sit there and pull up the adjudicated ballots. You can do the job of what the assigned Canvas Board from both parties were able to do. But Candace, thank you for reminding me of that. So the other thing is Colorado vote by mail system. We all know this. Everybody gets a mail ballot, multiple return options. I'm going to go through this real quick because I think everybody wants to talk about other things going on. So, Christy. So how to update or register to vote. Again, I think we're going to be talking about that here real quick. Receiving your ballot. You know, we have the ballot mailing period, address verification, timing expectations, and missing ballot solutions and things like that. So a lot of things that we have here in the county where, hey, I'm missing my ballot. Why did I not get it? And so a lot of times are the voters inactive. If you have not participated in a number of elections, you could be classified as inactive, which means you will not get a ballot until you reach out and activate your registration. Voting in person, what to expect, convenient locations, ID requirements, accessibility. One of the things that we're required to do, I reached out to both major parties, is since we have so many active voters in El Paso County, is on for our next general election, we got to increase our ballot boxes by 3. So we're going to be going from 41 to 44. And then we also have to increase our VSPCs. So we had 39 for the general election, and we're going to be increasing those as well. So right now, I'm working with Angie. We're looking at areas in the community to put those 3 ballot boxes. But at the same time, guys, that is a very difficult thing because you have to look at public transit, you have to look at ADA requirements, and a lot of our ballot boxes are on private property. You have to work with the property owner. And so thankful, a lot of those property owners are like, absolutely, you know, put it here. Boot Barn Hall is a great example. It's a great drive-up location. A lot of people use that. Charter schools have now allowed us. We installed 2 at charter schools. But now what we're sitting there looking at is Angie and I are looking on Colorado Avenue. I want to try to get one over on West Colorado at the Goodwill in that location, and the other 2 going another place where we see some spots where there's been a lot of growth in our community, but we just don't have the ballot boxes there.
Are you thinking about Hillside in this discussion?
Oh, Hillside, as far as putting a ballot box there? That's really difficult when there's only one a mile away.
Okay.
But we did do a VSPC.
Okay.
So there was a lady who rode me like 2 years. You know who it is too. So as you guys know, we have the most ballot boxes in the state, and we're going to be getting ready to go to 44. And the reason why I'm sharing this stuff with you is because I want this to tie into an executive order that I know you all have some questions about. Tracking our ballot, common election ballot inquiries, damaged ballot, lost ballot, signature discrepancy, missing signature. Anybody want to know how many folks are looking out for the taxpayer dollars and the husband puts their ballot in with the wife's envelope? They're saving postage. Don't do that. I'm going, thank you, I know what you guys are doing, but each envelope is for a particular voter and you have to have that signature. But there's a lot of folks that will sit there and do that. Christy, ballot security and counting processes, collection, auditing, verification, processing, and counting and all that stuff. So we talked about that. Special groups, military and overseas voters, guys, which is huge here. Angie and I did a national webinar on our overseas voters, which is significant. And we always mail those ballots out weeks prior to us getting the ballots. So we had significant turnout from our military in the November 2024 general election, where I actually had taken pictures from our security cameras where they were dropping soldiers off by the busloads at our VSPC on Fort Carson, because you all know we have a motor vehicle branch on Fort Carson. They were dropping them off by the busloads, and there was a line of about 300 people deep. Same thing here, you know, in fact, there was videos done where we were about 150, 200 people deep here at the Citizen Service Center on Election Day. And what was weird, guys, there were a lot of voters that had their ballot tucked under their arm, waiting in line to vote. Because historically, for a presidential election, I want to vote right in this booth. So they had the ballot. So, anybody want to talk about HR 22, the SAVE Act?
Yes.
Okay, let's do this. HR 22, as you know, was basically sponsored by a representative out of Texas. And really what this is looking at registration, voter registration. There is another act that is going to be coming down, and it's basically titled the MESA Act, which is Make Elections Secure Again. This act is looking at the registration piece. The MESA Act that possibly, most certainly will be coming down is talking about the tabulation voting equipment piece. So they're completely separate. But what I want to talk to you guys about is, let me set the platform. So again, going back to what I did in the introduction, guys, we are so used to hearing about legislation coming down from Denver. This is completely different. This is dealing with all 50 states, which is completely different. And not every state does things that we do here in Colorado. And we're sitting here going, wait a minute, we have got a dang good system here in Colorado, but why are we doing this? Because not every state does what we do with voter registration and things like that. But what is this act? Basically, it's requiring proof of citizenship for voter registration, full name, Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. We know that it passed the House. To be honest with you guys, I was really surprised. It, of course, was bipartisan. There was 4 Democrats that voted for it. So it passed the House and is now on to the Senate. So where
Will
were...
that be a simple majority in the Senate? Not 60?
No, it needs 60.
Okay.
Yep. So here's basically why a lot of folks are extremely concerned about this. The concern is to register to vote. They are basically saying you have to use either a real ID, which the state of Colorado does not issue a real ID for voting purposes. We know a real ID, we're issuing it because if you look at your ID and you see the star up there, that's a real ID. What that does is it allows you to get on a domestic or international flight or get into some federal buildings here in the state of Colorado. That's a real ID, but it is not used for voting. There's only 7 states in the entire nation that have real ID that they can use for voting, and they are the states that border Canada, because we have citizens that go back and forth. And they sit there and they work in Canada or they work in the United States, but they go back and forth. But they are the only 7 states that have a real ID. The other thing is we would sit there and have to take a look at birth certificates, is what they're talking about. And also passports. So there are a lot of things going on, a lot of communication with this registration process. And a lot of concerns where folks are like, hey, I don't have, my birth certificate. I don't have a passport. I've never traveled outside the United States. This passport can cost me $160. How do I get, my birth certificate, things like that. But these are, conversations that are going on where we're looking at amending the bill, things like that. Guys, I will tell you, I'm actually working with our legislators in regards to amendments, a number of different things, removing some of the barriers. The other thing that concerns me, guys, I will tell you, is military IDs will not work either. Because military IDs, if you're basically a officer, a commissioned officer, you have to be a U.S. citizen. To be enlisted, you do not. It's not on their barcode, and it's also not on basically the key on the ID. None of that information is on there. So now you're looking at the federal government not only is going to have to change the military IDs on the enlisted side or DOR, DEERS, independents and things like that. These are a lot of things that are being discussed. And I've actually been working with a number of lobbyists that the county's using on the federal side. Christy and I have been having conversations with these lobbyists up there in regards to some of the concerns. Because it's one of those things where as a soldier, airman, Marine, where you're sitting there going, I got a military ID. And I told them up at the MEP station that I was a US citizen. I've been a US citizen, but now that ID no longer works. So these are the conversations that are going on. Did you have a question, ma'am? Just waving, just waving at me?
Like a driver's license with a star on it?
Yep,
That's a real ID?
that's a real ID.
You said you could get on an international flight with it?
Yep,
Like,
You need a passport.
but you need a passport too?
correct.
Oh,
Yep. So really what it is, what it comes down to is domestic flights, international flights, or getting into federal buildings. This is an act that was implemented way before COVID, but they postponed it because of COVID. And then they pushed it saying, hey, May 7th of 2025, it's actually going to be implemented. And so Christy and I have been working extremely hard with the media and social media, going, guys, before you come into your motor vehicle branch, pull your ID out. If you got the gold or black star on there, you're good. But the thing is, though, for voting purposes, those are the things that we're going to have to, now everybody's pulling stuff out. Yeah. But if you guys drop your credit or debit cards, leave them on the floor, we'll get them for you. Yes?
So what are you gonna do to make sure that people aren't disenfranchised by a rule that requires you, I mean, a passport is a lot of money, a lot of people don't have that. And I know there's a problem also with women who have married.
Correct.
My birth certificate does not say the same thing as my driver's license. How are you gonna ensure that people aren't disenfranchised?
Which is a really good question. One of the things, though, guys, is we have to sit there and take a look at is how much can the federal government impede on states' rights? Anybody ever hear this through our Constitution? So this is where it's coming down, and there's going to be a lot of constitutional discussion going on. The federal government coming down and impeding on state rights, and our forefathers, that's the way they set things up. Going, hey, Big Brother does not need to oversee everything. It should be up to the individual states to do this. So that is a huge discussion going on. But to me, is an eligible voter, I will fight tooth and nail for them to sit there and be able to have the right to vote. But what I sit there and share with you is the premise behind this is there are states that don't do what Colorado does. And there are states that have sat there and shared that there's individuals on their voter rolls that should not be on their voter rolls. And so what they're trying to do is trying to come together collectively and say we all should do the same thing throughout the United States as far as voter registration. Only with a birth certificate and also with a passport, I have serious concerns about that. So there are forms of ID that I actually feel that we need to sit there and include and have discussions on. Because to me, military IDs, there are things that we actually have that we have to prove citizenship on already before we're issued that ID.
So now, if somebody registers to vote, under current law, Colorado, like you said, other states are different, but
Right.
how is citizenship established?
The honor system.
It's the honor system, Mike.
So there's no checking on,
So it's
you
a,
sign, I'm registered to vote for
yep.
like 50 years. So, I've been voting a long time, so I really don't know. So you sign an affidavit though, saying that part of that yes, I'm a citizen. You have to provide a driver's license as an ID or some other ones.
Right.
Electric bill, right?
Yep, so there are a number of things, but Mike, to answer your question, yes, Colorado is a self-affirmation state where they can go online and push a button saying, yes, I'm a citizen. That has led to a couple mistakes that we have caught here in El Paso County, where several weeks ago, a young lady from Brazil, she was on our voter rolls. She's not a citizen. But what happened is she put on there, she self-affirmed that she was a U.S. citizen, and we caught her. So what happened is we're sitting here going, these are people that are going through naturalization, and if she were to vote, that would have been a felony, and she's sent home. They have these naturalization lawyers that are helping them out. The last thing they want to do is to get a felony and ruin their chances of becoming a citizen. And I will tell you, she was scared. She's like, I'm going through this whole process to become this. I only made a mistake by pushing a button on a website. But it's a self-affirmation. But the thing is, though, to me, Mike.
So how was that caught then? I mean, it was a mistake, so let's say it was
So we
on purpose
actually,
or not on purpose, but
right,
it was
so we
caught.
actually run our database through SAVE, which is the federal immigration database. And that's where you catch it. The other thing is, believe it or not, there's folks that will sit there and walk into a county and say, I made a mistake. I hit the wrong button, oh my gosh, and they're standing there with their attorney because they want to become a citizen. But the thing is, when you're self-affirmation, when you make it that easy, is people do make mistakes. Yes, sir. Sorry.
Oh, all right, so live in Colorado, in the Army, Fort Polk, Louisiana.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And want to vote in a federal election. Military ID, no good. Can I use my Colorado driver's license as an ID?
So right now you cannot because it's not a real ID.
Couldn't vote.
Could not vote. So I know you're going with because I did the same thing, and there was a lot of soldiers that came through and up to our office in the VSPCs. They didn't want to contact their clerk and recorder at the state, and they're like, I just want to vote in the federal election, which they can. So they had to provide their citizenship and things like that, but we took their military ID, got them, registered and gave them a federal ballot, but they were not able to vote on any of the
Right.
local or state races, but they did the federal ballot,
Okay.
Yep.
How did they prove their citizenship?
military ID.
Oh,
But
you
this
took
right
it.
here, yep.
Okay.
So this is what we're talking about. But the key provisions, guys, though, is requires documentary proof of citizenship, mandates state verify. So they're trying to bring all 50 states into the same bucket. And also basically imposes penalty for noncompliance. So guys, this is a concern that I have. If Steve Schleiker makes a mistake and I register an individual who is a non-citizen as a citizen, I can get fined and go to jail. This is the first kind of law that we've ever seen. In addition to that, guess who else could go to jail? The election judges. These are individuals who are our neighbors, our family members.
And this passed the House?
It passed the House. So it's it's on the Senate now, and we're sitting here looking at a bunch of amendments. But the thing is, though, is our election judges can also be penalized and challenged as well. Yes, Candace?
I just wanted to say, I've studied up on the executive order, which is pointing to the SAVE Act. It's not deliberately written in there yet. But the five actually forms of ID that are listed in the Executive Act are the real ID. And I think if you have a driver's license within 5 years, you have to start on there. The other is any state or government-issued ID, a driver's license, which would include the star, of course, but there are real IDs that are not driver's licenses as well. And it did cite military ID, and then last was the passport. I think it is a canard out there that you need a passport to vote, which is like $150 to get a passport and a
Right.
lot of trouble. It is like the fifth form of ID that they would ask you
Yeah.
to present.
And this is where the confusion is, Candace, because the SAVE Act does not have those form of IDs listed in the bill.
Well, it's in the executive order.
In the
which
executive
is-
order, which is something completely different from the SAVE Act than the executive order. So the executive order, believe it or not, mirrors many of the things that we already do here in El Paso County.
Well, my point of view is that this is not obstructing people that are citizens to vote.
Right.
Just in 2020, that was only 5 years ago, Colorado voted that only U.S. citizens are allowed to vote in Colorado. So you would think we would be promulgating law that would ensure that only U.S. citizens are voting in Colorado. And that's what this is an attempt to do, not just in Colorado, but across the entire country with some
Right.
uniformity.
But the thing is though, Candace, what I want to do is separate the two because they're completely two different matters. One is President Trump's executive order, which has nothing to do with this. This is actually sponsored by a representative out of Texas.
I know it is, but I think
Yeah.
in the implementation of the executive order, it's gonna mean this. I don't think
Right.
it is completed, it hasn't been completed. The executive order just insists that there be documentation presented at the time of the voter registration, and there's gonna be a new form created to actually show the form
Right.
of the documentation you use to register.
Well, so at
And
this time,
it's a
though,
national
yeah,
form.
so at this time right now, there is no amendments to this act.
And
Um,
it's passed.
Well, it passed the House, it's on to the Senate.
It's not a law
It's
yet.
not a law.
It's closer than the executive order.
But the thing is though, there's gonna be a lot of
So there will
amendments.
be a
Yes,
Senate
ma'am.
version.
Right.
Hi, a couple of things. The first is maybe a silly question.
Yeah,
If this passes, this is only for new registrations, right?
correct.
So like, I wouldn't have to be, it's not gonna make all of us go back and re-register.
That's correct.
Okay. And the second thing has to do with the executive order versus the act. As I have read the Constitution, my understanding is it gives election rights to the states, but then it does have a little caveat that Congress can, but the president is not in there.
No.
The executive does not have the right to do an executive order affecting elections, am I right?
You're correct. So, talking to election lawyers, constitutional lawyers, and guys, I am the farthest thing from that. Did everybody hear her question? Okay. So, when it comes down, again, it comes down to the Constitution, is that an executive order does not have the authority to override state, state laws or things like that. And that's where the confusion comes down. But when you sit there and you talk to constitutional lawyers, is when they're sitting here going, okay, the President of the United States does not have the authority to impose, election items onto the states. So I've talked to many of them. However, as Candace alluded to, is this right here is a lot of the executive order that the President has shared, in which Colorado does. Nearly 95% of it will probably be picked up in this act as it works in the House and Senate.
The executive order doesn't make new laws. It's asking the states to enforce existing laws. Only citizens can vote has been the law for a long time.
Right.
There's
And then-
not anything really new in that executive order.
Right. Well, in President Trump's, like I said, President Trump's executive order is
Already in place.
is 95% of the order that he outlined is we're already doing 95% of that.
My point exactly.
Yep. But again, what it goes on to is we're talking about 50 other states. Yes, ma'am.
One of them, I don't know if it was the executive order or the state act that's went to Congress, mentioned that, or directed or whatever, that states could allow, the states could decide other supporting documents. You mentioned military IDs. Is there anything else that Colorado is considering as supporting
So,
documents or laws?
you want to team up?
Yeah,
Because we got quite a few of them.
Yeah, I just want to clarify something because I think there's a little confusion with real ID, if you don't mind.
Yep.
So Colorado does have real ID, but both the executive order and HR 22, right, it says real ID that shows proof of citizenship.
And ours does.
That's the biggest thing. Our Colorado IDs do not show proof of citizenship. There's only 7 states that have that. We are not one of them. And then when it talks about military IDs, it does say military IDs are acceptable with another document from the military stating citizenship. So it's still 2 things together.
Yep.
So I think that's where the confusion is. Sorry to interrupt. But real ID, we all have real IDs if you have the star, but our real IDs do not show proof of citizenship in Colorado.
And some of the things you guys were talking about is every military member, and I believe there's veterans in here, we're basically given a service record book. And, you know, I have not looked at my service record book since 1999, so I pulled it out. And it just says you'd be able to prove citizenship by your service record book. I could not find anything in my Marine Corps service record book that basically showed I was born at Fort Belvoir, Virginia in Washington, D.C. and proved citizenship. It had my medical information, it had my DD-214, honorable discharge, things like that. So these are things that we look at in regards to, you know, the citizenship aspect. But this act is definitely going to be amended as it's going. But I plan on working with, you know, Christy and my PIO in regards to keeping people up to speed of what is going on with it.
I don't know if your 214 shows proof of citizenship.
It does not.
Doesn't.
Okay, all right, that's what I thought.
It doesn't. Not at all. In fact, it's just basically your years of service, your medals, and where you've been, things like that, but it does not show citizenship.
Your bio.
Blood type, length of your toenails. Mike.
Okay, so I'm looking at the executive order. There's 4 types of, it says the purpose of the subsection of this section, documentary proof of the United States citizenship shall include a copy of a United States passport. Okay, I think that's good.
Yep.
An identification document compliant with the requirements of the Real ID Act of 2005 that indicates the application as a citizen. So there's only 7 states where people have those.
Correct.
Colorado not being one of them. An official military ID that indicates the applicant is a citizen, which you said it doesn't.
For enlisted,
And
they
then,
do not.
this is the one that gets me. So a valid federal or state government issued photo identification, if such identification indicates the applicant is a United States citizen, or it's accompanied by proof of United States citizenship. So what's an example of a federal or state government issued photo ID that indicates the applicant is a U.S. citizen?
I believe that's the tribal
Yep,
IDs,
yep.
It
the
does, I
tribals.
don't see.
but it would have to show that they were citizens
Okay.
Yep.
on the ID.
I guess one way they don't say that, but maybe
So
there's
only
some
tribal
others too.
people would have that one.
Correct.
Correct.
But it also doesn't
Shows
say anything
this.
about a birth certificate that I can see at all.
Right.
So,
So for the average person, all you would have to have a passport.
Yep,
or live in one of those 7 states,
Yeah,
or
the
I suppose
average
be a tribal
being
member.
out of most of the United States.
Mike, you were up there for this last election. It's too cold for me.
Well, but I don't see in this executive order anything about birth certificate. Am I reading it wrong, or is it
Maybe
somewhere?
they added it in the same act.
Well, yeah, they're different. I'm asking
Yeah.
about the executive order.
Right. So those are things that I will share with you, Mike, is I haven't looked at the executive order in probably 2 weeks, so I will go back through that. But I thought birth certificate was included in the executive
That's what
order.
that's been kind of the public debate,
Yep.
but if that's not even a thing, then it does get down for your average citizen in the state that's not one of those 7
Yep.
states. A passport, military ID won't work, this other, for the tribal, I guess, would.
Yeah.
I'm not a member of a tribe, frankly.
No, I think.
And then the other thing,
Yeah.
the other question I have about registering is in some states, and I'm not sure about Colorado actually, is when you move, you re-register. So you move across the hall. And I know one particular state, this is the case in, it's not Colorado. Does that apply in Colorado? Do you re-register, or you merely change, if you move within the state of Colorado, do you change your,
Your
you just
address.
change your registration, you
Right.
don't re-register, is that?
Right, you change your registration.
So it's a change, not a re.
Right. So Mike, so let's say you move from Colorado Springs up to Parker.
Right.
You're gonna be voting on way different things, so you wouldn't have to, you just change your voter registration with your new new mailing address and location, and it will outline what your new congressional district is, precinct, Senate district, all that type stuff. So it would just be updating your voter record.
Right, okay.
Yep. In fact, hold on.
So obviously you can speak to Paso County, I'm sure you have privy to information like that as well, but what is frequency of people that are not citizens voting to be actually?
Very little.
Can you repeat that question?
So the question was, what is the frequency of individuals who are non-citizens voting in our elections, and it's very little. The media did ask that question, Angie, what, 2 weeks ago?
Yes, so since 2015, we've identified 19 potential non-citizens. Of those, 17 were canceled. One actually was a citizen, and it just happens the date that she got her citizenship and registered was like within 2 days of running the report. She showed her proof. The last one we did prosecute because not only did she register as a non-citizen, she also voted as a non-citizen. So that one was actually prosecuted, but we've had 19 since 2015.
What is that?
So since 2015, so over
Also,
10
and
years.
Just El Paso County. Yeah,
Yeah.
just El Paso County.
Steve,
Oh, hold on,
could I
Candace.
just,
This young lady's been holding her hand up for quite some
point
time.
something out?
I'm really concerned about the imposed penalties for non-compliance when we're talking about public servants.
This guy does not look good in
When
orange.
you're talking about volunteers or, citizens trying to do their duty.
Yep.
And cooperating with that. I find it highly unacceptable that we have not done more to oppose that part of this act.
We have.
Because there's just like this assumption that you're not an honest person and that if there's anything that goes wrong in your catchment area is that it's nefarious.
Yep.
And when you talk about that make elections safe again, there's also an implication that it's not, it's fundamentally flawed and corrupt. And I just have issues with that as well.
Right.
And I don't like that for you or any of us that are just, we're going in, when you talk about that affirming attestation.
Yeah.
We need to take that, I take it seriously, it's like, I know what I'm saying. I don't know what, that's just
What-
bothersome to me, that I think it can be really impactful on actually who does take office.
Well, I actually appreciate you because although my wife who's sitting in the back would probably celebrate me being gone for an extended period of time.
Unless you take the dog.
Yeah. But I will, guys, here's the biggest concern is I take myself out of the whole entire equation is what judge would step up and serve the public in an election knowing
Right.
that the possibility, because somebody can come on in with a falsified document and just say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and register to vote. And if a mistake does happen, they can be prosecuted. There is no judge that I know that I have met over the last 2.5 years. It doesn't matter if they're Republican, a Democrat, or unaffiliated, none of them will take on that responsibility.
Well,
they'll
and
sit-
if you who's policing that?
The federal government.
So the FBI is going to
Right.
be.
Right.
this-
And just to share with you, that is one thing, and beyond others, that I'm actually sitting there saying, this is not right. And I don't want to put Sandra or anybody else, but Sandra, if you were sitting here working at VSPC, would you volunteer to do this stuff?
No, I mean, that's too scary.
Yeah.
Which then again makes me concerned about who will
Exactly.
and why.
Yeah.
It's already hard to get
It's like
judges.
the impropriety.
It is.
It's breeding impropriety.
It's really hard to get judges where we had to reach out to both of our major parties and say, hey guys, we need 80 more judges, which both of our major parties were amazing. The leadership was like, let us know. And the phones were ringing off the hook. And a lot of our neighbors are like, I'm in, I'm in, I'm in. But again, when you have things like that, where there's penalties, I don't see any judge doing it.
Exclusions.
Yeah.
It makes.
Candace.
Yeah, I just want to lay some of the fear here about this. The gentleman just looked up what the executive order says about the 4 or 5 forms of ID that are going to be acceptable.
Yeah, the foreigner.
I want to list you out of Colorado statute what are acceptable forms of ID in the state of Colorado, if you'll indulge me. Colorado ID, state ID, employee ID, government ID, FAA pilot's license, military ID, a utility bill, a bank statement, a government paycheck, a Medicare card, a birth certificate, a naturalization papers, a student ID and a veteran's ID. Am I making my point?
But none of the
There's
party.
a list of 18 or 19 acceptable IDs, all the way down to a student ID. This is an attempt to standardize with a proof of citizenship built into it somehow. This is open right now. Obviously, there's more to come on it, but I think you can see that, you know, these starred real IDs, this is an attempt to take a closer look at who is voting in our elections, particularly since we all together voted that only U.S. citizens vote in the state of Colorado. This is an attempt to stand behind that with our documentation.
But doesn't this mean that that whole long list you just read for Colorado, that people in Colorado, that would serve as ID? That all goes away.
I think it's absurd, right? It would go away.
That's what I mean, so.
So what I'm saying is that this is an attempt to tighten it
It's
up.
an attempt.
But there is
An
only
attempt to tighten it up and make it more
10 years.
And only
Problem.
Yes, ma'am.
I think in all of this discussion, obviously, we're not gonna resolve what happens.
No.
But what we need to think about is, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. You said that in the last 10 years, there has been one person who voted who was not a citizen out of 500,000 people.
That you know of.
How do you possibly know that?
They're checking pretty well. However, what this is going to try to do by restricting the IDs you can use is to disenfranchise many, many, many people. So I think we have to, nobody's saying that non-citizens should vote.
Correct.
It's how we, how do we include as many people who are eligible to vote and keep out the ones that are not? And it sounds like we've had a pretty good system so far, and that this kind of system would only muck it up. That's just something to think about.
Yes, ma'am.
This all kind of goes to my question, because I'm hearing positives that I hadn't heard before. If I'm contacting our senators about this, there's the penalty thing. What else would you suggest I be talking to them about as potential amendments that they should try to get in there?
You're amazing. And the reason why I say this is, guys, who do the elections belong to? The people. And when you're sitting here looking at either if you agree with portions of this or disagree with portions of it, or agree with wholeheartedly of it or disagree wholeheartedly of it, is, as this young lady alluded to, as my office has done, is I have reached out to our senators. I've also reached out to our congressional leaders, because guess what? Do you think they work in the realm of elections? No. So how much voice that we have, either as a clerk and recorder, or as an election department manager, or as somebody who has served as a canvass board member, or somebody that has served as an election judge and knows the system inside and out, how much credibility do you think they have? Quite a bit. And especially when, guys, when I'm explaining things to, Jeff Crank, and he is wide open. He's like, whoa, Steve, I didn't know this. What about this? What about this? What about this? And we've had amazing dialogue. And just basically some of the things that I feel need to change. But the other thing, though, guys, is let's be real. And the question that I ask every congressional leader or senator are, what are the chances of this passing the Senate? It's very shaky. Very shaky. Because you have to have a significant number of individuals on the opposite party vote for this. It is very, very shaky. But correct. Which is why, this is the reason why we have these community gatherings. Because you know what? there's gonna be more that come down. And there's gonna be more, more discussion on the federal level, which to me, this is amazing, is just get the disinformation out and separate the executive order from the SAVE Act and a number of other things. You had your hand up, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think there's more variables to the equation of, you said something like, well, if somebody does vote that's not a non-citizen, I could be incriminated. And then you have to say, well, then you're going to be responsible for looking at the voter rolls, which nobody does. The voter rolls are such a, they found algorithms in New York, American Sovereign America, was it Marley Hornick? They found algorithms with a letter, with 0 at the end, have voted like 3 or 4 times. They have it down to a science. They know the voter rolls are so corrupt in New York City, New York, the whole state. But it's like the voter rolls is such another big aspect to this about being responsible for whether a citizen's voting or not, because voters could be added to the voter rolls that are not citizens that we don't even know about, and that you'd be responsible for. If you would be, and you don't even get to look at the voter rolls, do you?
I do, because the voter rolls here, I'm in charge of. So, as I shared, when we looked at the undeliverables going from 49,000 down to 9,000, I'm the one that actually runs the voter rolls against DHS, Department of Homeland Security, SAVE, Social Security Administration, Immigration, which is the SAVE,
The dead person?
which is through CDHPE. I do that.
How many databases do you have to run against?
So, Ange, what would you say, 7 or 8?
We run it against CDPHE for deceased.
Yep.
We run it against Social Security Administration. We run it against SAVE, which is immigration.
DOR.
Department of Revenue for driver's license check to verify that the driver's license they gave us matches the name and date of birth. We run it against other counties to make sure there's only one voter record in the state of Colorado.
Immigration,
And,
SAVE.
Yeah, SAVE, and is that all of them?
So is that Eric? Are you affiliated with
We
Eric?
are the state of Colorado. Secretary of State's office runs it through Eric. We do not, but they do it at a state level.
Well, and the reason for Eric is we actually met with them. So it's the Secretary of State that does that contract, not a clerk and recorder. That will sit there and go with Eric. The sad thing about Eric is only 23 states are now included with Eric, which means you have 27 or more states that are not even sharing data with Eric, which is why I went with Experian.
What is Eric?
So basically, Eric is a national where you can bounce your voter rolls off of Eric. So it started, about 15 years ago, Ange?
Yeah.
Yep. So what it is basically they would take all the data from every state and find out you moved to Louisiana, Steve moved to Florida, and they would update all this information and they would share it with the Secretary of States of each state, and that Secretary of State would disseminate it down to the county level to make those changes in the voter rolls. But over time, states have been pulling out of ERIC, which to me, with Experian, is having that data, credit data, because when you move and you're sitting there going, I just bought a new house, or I bought a car, or I'm renting an apartment, they ran my credit, you're putting on, where is your mailing address, what's your primary residence, you get that information. And just to share with you guys, is there's zero confidential information shared from my office or through Experian. From my office is we basically do not share ACP. And those are voters that are victims of domestic violence and sexual abuse, the address confidentiality program. They do not get that data. They do not get confidential voter information. Everybody in here could be a confidential voter. You just come up to our office, pay $5, fill out a form, and no one can look at your voter record. So that's something that you can do, going, I don't want anybody to see my stuff or get anything, and it takes a district court order, but everybody can do that here. But they do not get military, they do not get ACP, and they do not get confidential voters. What they do get is first name, last name, middle initial, and mailing address and year of birth. They do not get month or day. So what happened is when Angie and I first ran that data query, and I think it was within the first 2 months I became clerk, is we had 50,000 records that could not be identified. So what we did is we reached out to these voters, either via email that is on their voter record, or we sent a postcard saying, hey, you need to update your voter registration, here's what's going on. And we saw over 1,000% increase of voters reaching out saying, I no longer live there. Sorry, please take me off your voter rolls. Or a 500% increase of folks going, I need to update my mailing address. I no longer live, off Centennial Boulevard. I'm down here in Metropolitan in Widefield. They just never updated the stuff. Thus far, we have ran 3 queries through Experian, and it's been absolutely amazing, especially how transient our community is here, is those having those mailing addresses up to date. But the best compliment that I got is we have 2 judges who are Brenda Conrad and Candy Boyer, who work all of our, and you know who they are, they work all of our return ballots. They're like, Steve, we have nothing to do, we're going home. That is a huge compliment where you got 2 judges going, you're putting me out of work. So, yes ma'am.
I just want to make a comment about that, Eric. It does not have a very good reputation, which is why you had 49,000 undeliverables, because it was not cleaning your voter rolls. It wasn't taken care of, right? Am I being truthful on this? Because if it was doing its job, you wouldn't have had those 49,000 undeliverables.
Not necessarily, because Eric is if they've moved to other states. So if people have moved within Colorado, it's not going to pick
Eric
it up.
does a lot more than
Yes,
that.
we don't use Eric to register voters, which is, a lot of people think that we use Eric to register voters. We do not do that. We will, if they've moved outside of the state, we can send them a letter saying, hey, we've got notification you moved outside of the state, would you like to withdraw? We cannot cancel a voter off our Eric records. We cannot, because it has to be voter initiated. So you're right, we did still, it's doing its job, but federal law does not allow us to cancel a voter off what we get from Eric. It only allows us to reach out to the voter. It does allow us, though, however, if we receive notification from any of the states that a person has passed away, because we only get to look at Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment for people that passed away in Colorado. So if people have passed away in those other states, it allows us to cancel those voters. But we cannot cancel a voter off information we get from Eric, but that's federal law. We are not allowed to do that. It only allows us to reach out to that voter.
Well, Eric has never been officially certified either.
Certified for what?
For use in elections.
There's a lot of, we don't have to have certification for everything we use in
All right,
elections.
well, that's part
And
of,
that's why
that's
we
part of
can't
the,
do
but
it.
that's part of the executive order. Is Eric is an election system, and now they're going to be required to be certified.
And that can be part of it, but we don't consider Eric an election system. We consider it like a third-party vendor like we do with Experian.
Yep.
And we don't make changes on Experian. We only reach out to the voter. We cannot make changes to a voter record when a third party tells us something, other than NCOA. That's the only way. If we get something from NCOA, we can't
Tell them
cancel
what
them.
NCOA is.
Oh, I'm sorry, National Change of Address. So we do run daily. We have stuff going through NCOA. If we receive notification that a voter moved outside of the state, we are allowed to, by law, inactivate them. Cannot cancel, inactivate them, send them a confirmation letter by forwardable mail to make sure they get it, and say, hey, we received notification, you've moved outside of the state. Would you like to withdraw your registration? You're currently inactive. We have some people that accidentally move themselves out of the state. They check the box that they're instead of temporarily away, they make it permanent. We also, believe it or not, on your change of address, I guess, I've never done one change of address, but you can check a box to move the whole family.
Yeah.
And when a kid goes away to college and they do a change of address, they move the whole family. And so that is why we cannot cancel based on that. But we will inactivate if we get notice that, and we give you the opportunity, no, it was an accident. I need to reactivate my account. Now, once you become inactive, when we mail that notification to you, federal law allows us, if you miss 2 general elections, then you will be canceled. So you'll go from inactive to cancel. So, like you said, Eric is somewhat doing its job. It's given us the information and we're required to follow by statute what we can do with that information. So to us, we consider Eric as a third-party vendor like we would Experian or anything like that. We have to follow the statutes that are around it.
So if,
But your comment was correct. Because it's only as good as the data it has, and when you only have half the states that are participating and the other half are not, you're really only getting a portion of the data.
but now the Clerk already gives you access to all those other systems, all those other databases to be able to verify.
Well, and one of the things, guys, that we're sitting here talking about is, believe it or not, I'm absolutely glad, because I've been getting nothing but pushback. When we're sitting here talking about that I'm in charge of the El Paso County voter rolls, I've been asking to get access to the Department of Human Services data to match that. And the reason why that's important is because my wife works for Department of Human Services. She helps seniors, processing, and she basically, gets them Medicare, Medicaid, and the necessities, that our senior community needs. But at the same time, is state and federal law, is if you have somebody that's a non-citizen, they can get some benefits as well, but that is some good data. But everybody, the other thing that's good data that I gotten pushback on is, what about the jury commission? The state jury commissioner, can you serve on a jury as a non-citizen?
No.
Can you serve on a jury as a felon? They have that data. But what's happening is every time you sit there and you try to put this information together, you would think that a government entity would be talking to another government entity, and it's not. They shut it down and they lock it. And so to me is to ensure, basically, hey, our voter rolls are as pristine as they possibly can, is, open things up, allow people to sit there and pull this information, to match, voter information or individual information. But again, here is we sit there and we query the voter rolls. And as, Angie alluded to, I as clerk do not have the authority to remove somebody. We have to reach out to them. We have to contact to say, hey, are you not living here? Things like that. And once we get the notification, then they're off, or they change their voter registration. Yes, sir.
You mentioned on the confidential voter rolls, everybody who could not access them?
Yeah.
You didn't say law enforcement.
Law enforcement, absolutely. So there is a statute that allows law enforcement, and believe it or not, is also election workers.
Okay, but law enforcement can access?
Oh, no.
With a subpoena.
With a subpoena.
Okay, all right.
Oh, so you're talking, I'm sorry, but yes, law enforcement officials, and now there was a law that was passed, also folks that are, medical, EMTs, and also firefighters are blocked. Basically, they're considered confidential voters, and you cannot get access. So if anybody wanted to sit there and say, I want to know what Steve Schleiker's voter record is if I was a confidential voter, you would need a court order or a subpoena.
I worked with women fleeing domestic violence, and the police scenario was a problem.
So I don't know if anybody here remembers House District 20 Representative Terry Carver.
Oh, yeah.
She and I,
Last night.
yep, she and I worked on the ACP program. So when I was your county assessor, I learned a statistic that was very, very bad. So it was like 58% of women that were sexually abused or a victim of domestic violence chose to be homeless because they did not want to sign a lease agreement or purchase a home because they become part of the public record. And their stalker or abuser could find them through the assessor's website, treasurer's website, all the government websites. So Terry and I sat there and was like, this is wrong. And we worked diligently for several years on the ACP program where you cannot find these individuals. They are provided a false address. They're given a P.O. box. You can't find them at all. Everything.
Voter rolls, ACP.
Yep, voter rolls, even if they were to record anything, they are completely masked. So if they were to sit there and just say, I'm gonna do a quick claim deed on my property, but they're in the ACP program, they are completely masked. You can't even find them.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's good.
So it's the executive order and the Mesa Act, you mentioned the Mesa
No,
Act, but
so
you
Lynn-
never explained it.
So no, so the executive orders from the president,
Right, I know that.
okay,
Yeah.
yep, which the acts actually have to come from Congress.
Okay, so the Mesa Act is what?
So that is one that is gonna be coming down in the next several weeks. There's rumors on that, and that has to deal with election equipment. So again, it really does not impact a lot of the states or a lot of the counties, because many rural counties don't have election equipment. They're using election judges for all that stuff. But with that being said, this is the one here, and as Candace was alluding to, there is a major difference between the executive order and also the SAVE Act. And there is going to be a time where these two are going to come and collide with one another. But this is an opportunity to go back to what this young lady in the back said, is the elections belong to us. And if you guys are sitting here and you have some concerns, is you need to reach out to your elected officials, your congressional leaders or your senators going, hey, you know what? I'm really not liking this part of the bill or this act, or I really do like this piece of it, and voice your opinion. But as your clerk and recorder, I am already knee deep in the middle of this stuff, because guys, the processes we have here in El Paso County are amazing. And I'll tell you what, when Angie and I were flown out to San Diego, California to a pledge conference, and what pledge stands for, basically, it is partnership of a large election jurisdictions. There was probably 80 clerks and recorders and also their election leaders with them in this one ballroom. What was unique about this is all 80 of us represented over 75% of every voter in the entire nation. So you're talking clerks and recorders from Miami-Dade, Chicago, Minneapolis-St. Paul, LA, Maricopa County, which Maricopa is what, 1.5 million voters? So you're talking the big, big dogs. And when you're sitting here having these conversations, because guys, I will tell you what, there's one thing that we're going to be doing in our elections here, is the notifications. We're going to change things up here in El Paso County. And I learned this from the Raleigh-Durham Clerk and Recorder at the Pledge Conference. And I will tell you, we go to conferences here in Colorado, there is nowhere near what we learned at Pledge in San Diego. Raleigh-Durham, when I met with that clerk, I asked the question because, do you guys remember that they had a major natural disaster, which was a hurricane that came through during elections? It was all over the news. How are these people getting their ballots? They're being disenfranchised. They're this, they're this. It was all over the news. And you had people, guys, when I was your county assessor, Waldo Canyon, Black Forest, the floods in Manitou, the landslides in Skyway. I'm like, I am tired of Colorado and natural disasters. But what I learned is when you lose your property, where does your mail go? General delivery. And it usually takes about 2 to 3 weeks for a property owner to get their things together to set up a P.O. box. By that time, do you think the election's over? Here's what the Raleigh-Durham clerk did, and I found it absolutely ingenious. He developed an app. And he told all his voters to download the app. And it pushed notifications. So you sit there and you look at it, and I have it downloaded because I'm looking at this app and it's pretty amazing. And what it does, it pushes notifications going, we are hand delivering ballots at this location on this day at this time. Voters lined up. Yep. So, but the other thing what it did, it also sat there and pushed notifications to go, check your voter registration. Update your voter registration. The countdown is we have 106 days to our next election. And everything was on this app. And it would tell you where your closest ballot box is, VSPC. But it was an amazing communication tool. And I said, how successful was it? Because to me, my daughter, who's 22 years old, she'll download the app. Steve Schleiker, who's 55, who hates that stuff. You're looking at the dynamics. He said, believe it or not, Steve, I had more seniors 65 plus that use the app.
Wow.
Yep. Yes, ma'am.
Well, that's a segue to the question I wanted to ask about was, what are you doing for younger voters to try
try and engage them. You have an app, Sandra mentioned that you were working on developing an app.
Yep. So we're actually working on an app, but I will tell you, one of the things that I learned, guys, I hate social media. I loathe it, but I realized if you run for public office, you got to use that stuff. But we hired an amazing young man from KRDO. So I really got tired of him writing bad stories about me, so I just hired him. But no, so Christy hired, when I made her my deputy, she was the PIO. Quinn is of that age. He's in his middle 20s. He is communicating with the younger generation. Maybe some of you guys saw some of the social media where, you know, March Madness, the basketball teams, the 64 teams. Guess what we did? License plate bracket. People picked their favorite license plate and they played them against one another and they voted for their favorite license plate. Guess which one won? National Park. So, but you know, those are things, I cannot believe how many hits he got from younger kids that were like, oh, you know, I like this one, or, you know, the Purple Heart one, or the Marine Corps one, or this one. But it came out, it was the National Park that beat all 64. But Quinn's doing an amazing job on social media. He's on Instagram. It's not Twitter anymore. What's it called?
X.
X?
Yeah.
Facebook? Yeah, all that stuff.
Speaking of younger voters, is there somebody in your office that reaches out to high schools?
And I'm going to sit down because I'm going to let her brag because, guys, I will tell you what, I was going to
You guys know
piggyback.
Sam, if you've been an election judge, because he hires for all the VSBCs.
But let me share this real quick. Guys, the first time we ever did this, I applaud my staff. We had an I Voted sticker contest, and I want you to talk about that, how successful it was, because these were kids in elementary, middle school, and high school that participated. It was amazing.
Okay, so first, the sticker contest. So we had Sam do the sticker contest, and we had winners for different age brackets, and we had over 150, I guess, entries. There you go, thank you. Entries, and we spread them all out, and then the staff narrowed them down to the top, and we had a little vote, and we picked our winners. We asked the winners and their families came to a county commissioner meeting. So we presented them their awards at the county commissioner meeting, and then they got to do a tour of the office. And as they did the tour, we had their entries framed, and they're up in the elections area, and anybody that was on the tour, we took it down and they autographed it for us and everything, so we have it up there. And those were the stickers you guys saw on your voter instructions in this last election. So we had 6 different ones, 2 winners from each age category. And so, yeah, it was very, very successful.
Do you guys remember seeing the astronaut on the moon? That sticker? So he basically, it was an astronaut in a spacesuit holding up a sign says, I voted. And I'm going, hope you updated your voter registration. But
Yeah, so it was
guy, he was a 10-year-old that drew that. It was amazing.
And then outside of the sticker contest, Sam works every year we assign we don't want to call him a DEO, it's kind of a high school liaison at each of our high schools. And we work with them to help register kids. Because if you have an 80% or 85%, don't quote me, of your registered senior class registered, you can win the Eliza Pickrell Award through the Secretary of State's office. And we've had Manitou Springs win it, we've had, I want to say Colorado Springs Christian School and St. Mary's have won it in the past. So we work very closely with the high school registrar. And then we also, Sam also does Zoom meetings with the high schools and trains them on, the election process and recruits them to be student election judges. So anybody that's worked, we've had student election judges out of the VSBCs, we have them upstairs in our mail ballot processing room, and they work curbside for us. So if you're 16 or 17 years old, a junior or senior in high school in good standing, we can hire you as an election judge, and you work right alongside our seasoned election judges.
They get paid too.
And they do
They
get
do
paid.
get paid.
They get paid, yes.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
How can I volunteer to be involved in elections?
To be an election judge?
To do something volunteer.
Well, unfortunately, we don't do volunteers. We have to, they're paid positions. And they have to be paid just by statute. And so we have to run background checks and hire you as an election judge. We start hiring election judges for the November election, probably late August. So the best way, if you're affiliated with a major political party, you can ask your party to put you on the election judge list, because we do hire those judges first. And then any other openings we have after that, we can hire anybody from the public. And that's usually around the late August timeframe.
It's
So
a lot
I
of-
go to EPC votes, or I go to what?
You can go to ECP Votes, we'll have a link there, and there will also be on our county website, because it'll be a job posting that's on there.
I love election
But feel
time.
free to call us
Yeah.
like middle of August, and we'll let you know where we are in the process.
These judges can cook. They bring in some amazing baked goods.
So where do we find, one of the things that we've been looking for is where do we find when the elections are? I mean, where do we find, is there a timeline, like when there's going to be the elections? And you said November, but, or has the issues that are going to be voted on,
Yep.
where do we find that?
So Lynn, you can actually, if you guys want to be on my distribution list, everybody I believe has my business card, please shoot me an email. I send out, there's several individuals that are sitting here that are on my now distribution list, and I actually send out weekly reports of what is going on with voter registration. The other thing is I also send out an election calendar. So each and every month I sit there and share with whoever's on this distribution, and I also include both major party, their leadership, of here's what's happening May 2025 in your clerk's office for the election. But anybody can be involved on that distribution list. I send all things elections out there to folks. Christy.
All of that information is also on our website,
Yep.
epcvotes.com.
One thing I also want to share, guys, and I didn't ignore this, but we're out of time. But I want to share that there was some really, really good questions that came through. Sandra shared these, and it focuses on the SAVE Act. What is the incidence of fraudulent voting? I know we have some questions on there, but there's some questions here that we never got an opportunity to answer. But what I would like to do is I'm of the thought, everybody here had to register, if I'm correct. Okay? But if not, guys, here's what I will do, is I have the answers, my answers of how your clerk and recorder's office is addressing each one of these. I will share those with Sandra to have them emailed out to everybody, because I don't like people going, hey, I asked this question, it was never addressed. So I will do that this week. In addition, is if you did not register, guys, shoot me an email. I got this in a template already. I will shoot you the same thing to include the presentation. Or if you guys have more questions, because these are things that we're going to be doing throughout the community. I've been talking to Christy going, we got to keep people informed. Here's what I don't want to have happen, guys. I do not want our voters to be confused going into the November election at all. This is a major election coming up. Anytime you have a November election, there's a lot of things going on. And in 2026, we got another general election right around the corner. But this one here, the coordinated, is very important here locally for all things. When we're sitting there talking about, do we raise taxes? Do we, all school board members, just a number of different things that affect us here locally. But like I said, I don't want to ignore anybody, but Sandra, if that's okay, I'll shoot you an email with all of my responses. So before we wrap up, is there I'll take one more question. Lynn.
Well, only because there's been a big discussion about moving elections. And I'm just curious, so would you think there would be an advantage in having all the elections in November, as opposed to how we do it, like we just had the city council, and now we're gonna have this special election, and then we interpret stuff, and then we'll be in.
Lynn brought up a very good point. So her question was, what are my thoughts in regards to the county running all the elections here instead of the city of Colorado Springs doing it? And I'm actually all for it. I've had meetings with the city. I've met with Mayor Yemi several times. The turnout, as you guys saw, when it's 20-some%, is horrible. And that's historic what shows up for a city election. To me, I told him we could do it for cheaper. And then also I told Yemi, I sadly have set you and Sarah up for failure. Because all the things that Angie and her team and we have done, the changes in elections we have done, the city does not have. And voters are like, hey, where's my text to cure? Where's my text that you counted my ballot? Where's all this stuff? But what it does, it confuses voters going, hey, Steve, I didn't get my ballot. Guys, guess who gets those calls? It ain't Sarah and it ain't Yemi. It's Angie and me. And we're like, well, you need to call Sarah at the city. But the thing is, though, Lynn, they would have to take it to the vote to change the city charter. I am all for it. I've told Yemi, to me, you need to do it. Because the turnout, when you're getting 20% and in a November election, you're getting 70%, is significant. And we could do it. Yes,
What
ma'am.
do you do with the other places like Fountain, Security, Whitefield, Monument, Palmer Lake, and Hanover, and Cowtown, and them?
So Monument has already written into their charter that they coordinate with us in November.
Yep.
So has Fountain, and so has Van Springs.
Okay.
So
So
all
all
of
the
them
municipals.
automatically come to November. The only elections they will conduct is if it's a special election, because that's in their charter still. But their November elections, their board members, everything is on our November election.
Well, then we still have a few with Green Mountain Falls.
Green Mountain Falls, actually, thank you, they
I
just,
know, right?
They
did
just
it
did.
their last
I
vote. So
started thinking
Green
of
Mountain
that.
Falls is now new with us. Cowhan, Town of Rama, and Palmer Lake have not yet. But the other ones have.
Ellicott, Rush.
Ellicott's not a town, Rush isn't a town.
Okay, well, I guess I didn't know that, but I know they're
Yeah,
part of-
it's like the municipality, so they're not considered incorporated.
But guys, thank you so much.